back with the Orem Academy and our man with the denture plan, Dr. Chris Bertsch. Uh, Today's topic is going to be correcting the mistakes of digital dentures. We've gone through and kind of gone the basics of what to do for both our full and partial dentures. And now we're going to go through some little hiccups, perhaps, that might have gone on throughout it. So we will now hand it across to Dr. Bertsch and let him do his magic.
Thank you, the man with the denture plan. That's so funny. Honestly, most people call me denture daddy, which is cringe-worthy on its own. So that's at least a little bit better. So yeah, today we're going to talk about correcting the mistake. So I listened to this podcast and it talked about how like I just basically realized that I've been talking about all my successes, and it was like I have messed up a lot to get to this point. So this lecture was kind of difficult for me to like organize and put into a plan, because it's like I've had to over 5 years of doing dentures in different forms learn a lot. So yeah, we'll get started and I'll try and tell you about every time that I messed up without using the F word, because that's going to be the challenge for today. So this is a webinar series. So for the fall, I cannot believe the summer's over, because I feel like I was just singing summer's out or school's out for the summer. So we're going to do the digital dentures today, making mistakes, and then on October 4th, creating a niche. And then there won't be one for November because my wife and I are due with her first baby on November 8th. So need to learn dad mode real quick here and switch into that. So yeah, and the creating a niche, it's just going to talk a lot about every time I've joined a new practice, I like only once out of the 5 different practices I've joined did they have a denture program already, and somebody who did dentures before that I just took over, and patients knew the clinic had dentures. So that one's going to be creative and fun, and just talk about how I've created a niche for myself in every clinic doing dentures, and hope that you guys can do that too. So yeah, so overview, we're going to talk about the mistakes with scanning, immediate dentures, partials, relines, and then issues in solving. So there's like a bunch of little things that I've kind of formulated into a table. Some I've grabbed from my notes from dental school because I've experienced them on the regular, and some are just from experience. So anyways, I put them in a table, and the idea with that was to make a ready reference so that you guys could go back and hopefully have something to reference if you run into these issues. And this picture here is the biggest mess up of all. I actually won an award in dental school for the biggest F up. And what that was my molar endo competency. And I just kept condensing. And then I take the radiograph and see that. And I was like to the prof, I was like, you're never going to believe this. Like, I failed, because nobody ever fails. And this is what I was told. And I show him this and he's like, oh my God. So anyways, that's not a human tooth. Well, it's a human tooth, but it's in stone, and that wasn't somebody's actual head. So, and I've done much better since, but don't really enjoy root canals still to this day. So that kind of sets the tone and what we're going to talk about. So scanning mistakes. So of course, with the digital denture, scanning is going to be the most challenging. And today we struggled so hard with the scanner. We have an Itero 2, I think. And yeah, it was glitching out so much, and we were dealing with so many issues, and we just kept trying and got the scans done and everything. But there are days where the scanner is just absolutely on holidays, and we struggle to use it as well. But this is things that I've come across that and like kind of solutions for them. So the scanning sleeve window is foggy. So I actually have a picture of that. It happened today as soon as I started scanning. So you can see that black square there, and then there's all those streaks. So when I take the scanning sleeve off, it's clear. So this all those streaks are going to make scanning so much more difficult, and you're going to find you're going over the same spot over and over and over. So before you start scanning, just make sure that is a solid black and there's no streaks and nothing in that window. And if there are, change out the scanning sleeve. Like I said, today we struggled, and the one patient, we were doing a simplest denture, relined it, scanning the denture, and my assistant went through 4 scanning sleeves because they all were smeared, and it just slows it down so much. So that's the first thing I always look for as soon as I get this, go to the scanning page. And then, so yeah, when you're scanning, you'll notice that sometimes it's glitching. If the scanning screen is clear, that window is black, you know it's not that. So going over and over and over an area, basically what it does is layers the images on top of each other. So then it can, one, distort when the lab goes to 3D print anything, because there's so many more layers. And like, of course, they're like microscopic layers, but like at the end of the day, they can all add up and add to distortion. So if something's not scanning, I'll first load it, so let it cycle through, and then after that, if that didn't work, then I just honestly delete it and start over. And that's what we did a lot of today too, just deleting, starting over, which brings me kind of to jump to the end, is if you're scanning the same area over and over and over again, you're just gonna get more and more frustrated. It's honestly less painful to just delete the scan and start over than it is to just keep trying. I know it's really disheartening at first, but once you do it, you're like, okay, and then just scan as continuous as you can. So like when you scan intraorally, they always say like the faster you can scan, the better, in a continuous motion. So same thing with dentures extraorally and soft tissue, just scanning in a smooth continuous motion, and not taking too long, because then it just kind of glitches more. And then the other thing too is, and that's what we are going to do, or the assistants are doing this afternoon, is calling iTero, getting the customer service to clear the iTero, because with doing dentures and we do a lot of Invisalign, so all of that takes up a lot of space in the iTero, so that can also really slow it down. So making sure the iTero isn't bogged down with too many files, and that we just do by calling the iTero customer service desk. And then the AI cleanup. So I think in the spring sometime, iTero did an update. And so when you select denture, now it's supposed to automatically do the AI cleanup, but sometimes it doesn't. And that's what I noticed that we also have issues with. So again, just make sure the AI cleanup's always selected. So you just start scanning and then touch the screen, wait for that. There's like 3 or 4 options that pop up, and then disable the AI cleanup, and that will help. So yeah, the scanning, honestly, the first time I scanned a patient took me an hour and a half. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of patience, but it does work. I've been doing it for 3 years, but yeah, it's just kind of one of those things that takes a lot of time. And if you have a spare denture or a demo denture, like just practice scanning that, because that's where you're gonna realize the best way to do it. So there's the scanning mistakes we've had and how we've solved them. So there's the screen again. And then, so immediate denture mistakes. So this case was just an absolute crash landing. And so yeah, his original was so small you couldn't tell he had teeth. And then we had it relined right away, and got new teeth set. But then this is at his 3-month post-op. So where we're going to reline it, give him the final reline, and you can see the midline's off, the smile's canted, and so we need to fix this guy up. He was very not happy. He actually went to the denturist in Kindersley as well and had the denture adjusted. So so yeah, we relined it for him because it was at 3 months, so he needed that done anyways. And we got the denture there. And then, so to communicate all this with the lab, the corrections I want, I sent those pictures, the picture at the beginning there, and then I marked the denture here just with a Sharpie, just marking the midline. And to mark the midline, I take floss and just put it in the middle of the chin, middle of the forehead, going straight down the nose. And then I just use a Sharpie, and that's how I mark the midline. And then, as you can see, they put considerably bigger teeth in. And like I said, I just asked for bigger teeth and sent those pictures, and the lab selected those teeth. And I was actually really happy. We have a final picture here coming up. But yeah, so even the like mistakes aren't as detrimental doing digital dentures, I find, because there's more reference, especially like with immediate. So this is just showing the soft tissue capture. So we did the reline and then scan the reline, and there's the denture with the PIP paste. So you can see it's basically touching, maybe not right in the middle of the roof of the mouth there in the palate, because there's still the brush lines, but everywhere else it is. So that's what I always do, just to make sure it's fully seated. And then there's his final denture. So he's much happier with that. The midline's much better. His smile is a lot more natural. So he was a lot better with that. So the next one is Nathan. And I know I've talked about these cases before, but they were like serious issues. So with Nathan, he had the posterior, or sorry, the anterior open bite. So when he bit down, he only touched with his sevens with his immediate denture. And so this one, I relined them upper lower, sent a bite reg, and asked them to close the open bite. And what I should have done is asked for them to leave the smile as is, because what ended up happening is it was pulled down. So all the anterior teeth came down, and then gave him this horse mouth. And what I should have done is said, leave the smile line, entered the posterior teeth. So again, it's what it comes down to is me not communicating with the lab, I find, because when I ask for things, it comes through. So just being more specific with my instructions and directions is really the main theme that I've learned throughout this. So yeah, that's him smiling there. And you can just see all the gums, all the teeth, everything. And then the other side on my left is him at rest. So yeah, it was quite a lot. So yeah, hindsight, what I would have done is just, because the patient was happy with the smile, would have got the back teeth and treated and then dealt with that. So yeah, so what I ended up doing was just marking the lip line in Sharpie and then sending that back. For some reason, he didn't want his picture taken for the final. So that's the final denture. So you can see a lot more leeway space, a lot more natural. That's him smiling. He wouldn't give a normal smile. I just couldn't understand. But anyways, that's what we got. So with partial dentures, the biggest mistake that I've made is the cases where I don't create rest seats. Especially when you look at the occlusion, and if the opposing is a crown, a porcelain, any kind of crown, any kind of restoration, because oftentimes you'll get a thing back that says they needed to create space, so then you need to adjust the opposing, which depending on the case can be almost impossible. So I have since tried to make it a point to always do rest seats, so that the lab has the space to create the rest seat and have the bulk of material to properly function. So that's one thing that I've again learned from my mistakes from partial dentures, because you'll get the denture back and then now you got to adjust it. But if you do the rest seats, you do the guide planes before, and in my partial denture lecture, I talk more about how I do that, then at the end of the day, it's going to fit better. Those are the ones you pop in and they're a home run. The patient's really happy. So you want to make sure that, yeah, I just suggest doing them. The other thing is that if there's space, so to do a lingual bar versus a lingual plate, so that's the major connector on the back there. So this picture here shows the lingual bar. So you need at least 8 millimeters of space from the pharyngeal margin to the floor of the mouth to do the lingual bar. That one's going to be a lot better for the patient, a lot less of a food trap for them, and lower risk of redecay because you don't have that plate resting on the lingual, the lower anteriors. So what I've started doing now is I just measure right away in the consult, and if we have that 8 millimeters, I request it. So request the bar, and then otherwise go with the lingual plate. And then the other thing too is distal extension cases. Sometimes I'll get a clasp and I want an eye bar, but I didn't communicate it. So sounds like I'm beating myself up, but I'm really not. I'm fine with it. So do the eye bar. It's a lot more retentive, and then you have better, yeah, it's a lot better clasp for that type of situation. So any distal extension, no posterior tooth to support it, do the eye bar. And some mistakes I've made with relines. These are pictures that I've either gotten back from the lab or that I've taken. So trimming the impression material, so important. And I didn't realize this when I first started doing them. So any reline material, PVS, that's covering the teeth or any features of the denture. So the lab can do a reline, digital reline, and it's just a reline, exactly, the teeth are the same, or they have to do a new denture. So in situations like this, where the material is covering a part of the denture, then it's more complicated for them. They have to redesign that area because it's covered. So just making sure we're trimming. So just like 2 millimeters over the height of the flange there once it rolls over. And then just make sure you can see all the teeth, all major features of the denture before scanning it. So here's a really one where I really phoned it in. So again, it's covering basically all the teeth. So that one needs to, oops, sorry. So that one I needed to trim a lot more, just so it rolls over and captures the vestibule, not covering up the teeth. So that's important with relines, because then it's just, I believe it's easier for the lab to just process the reline digitally. So this is what it should look like. So there you have that proper space. You still have the roll of material. It's trimmed up nicely, and then it's easy for them to work with it. So the other thing I've experienced with relines is in the green circle there. So this was a case where we're going to do a reline, but there was defects in the impression, and it's actually, as you can kind of see there, the same case as this one. So the teeth were covered up by the impression material. The inside, the intaglio surface there, had defects of its own. So I got an email, and they could correct this by smoothing it out, but then it's no longer considered a reline. It's considered like a new denture. So we ended up getting a new denture for the patient, which is fine. But it's just a little bit more work for the lab. So just making sure you're trimming everything properly and that there's no voids or errors. Like, I don't know how I got a triangle in there, but manage that. So okay, so this I'm gonna try and not make incredibly boring, but this is just issues that I've run into when you're at delivery and you go to place the denture and then you notice these things, and it's like, okay, how do I solve it, or what? How do I even figure out what's wrong, kind of thing. So the first one, and this happens a lot, and I find like you'll do the denture, you'll do the reline, it's really retentive, you're like, hey, this is awesome, it's gonna be perfect, and then you get the denture back. It actually happened to me today, and then you place it and it's like falling out, it's so loose, you're like, did I even do the reline, did I send the reline? You're looking at everything, and it could just be the fluid or the contours of the patient's mouth. So I get like they have a salty meal and they retain fluid, or they got sick, lost weight, like different situations where their mouths change, obviously. And so I have the patient bite on the denture for 5 minutes with cotton rolls in. Doesn't have to be a heavy bite like after an extraction, just gently biting, but just biting to see if that is going to improve retention. And oftentimes it honestly does help. Sometimes there can be other issues. So I also use the PIP paste to see, make sure it's like today the denture wasn't quite seating all the way. So I used the PIP paste, adjusted any burn throughs. And then once there was no more burn throughs, the denture was seating properly according to the PIP. Then I had the patient sit there and bite on the denture for 5 minutes with the cotton rolls. And then, oh yeah, so this is especially with immediate dentures, this is very common. Patients will come in and they'll be like, it just hurts like all up in here. They'll be like, it hurts down here. And then I look and it's like there's no actual like sore spots, ulcerations, anything like that. But then you look and you do the border molding movements and you pull on the lips, and then you realize that the frenum is trapped by the denture. So every time they go to move, that frenum can't move, and then it's rubbing. So it radiates the pain. So for them, it feels like this large area. But all I do is then take a thin acrylic burr, tiny one, and then just create space for that frenum until I can pull and do the border molding movements and it doesn't dislodge the denture. And then it's a lot more comfortable for them. So usually with immediates now, when I deliver, so like extract the teeth, deliver, I make sure that there's all that space for the frenums because that's a huge one that they always come back with. So that's the thing with immediate dentures or any deliveries. Like I always do the PIP, do the border molding movements because I'm like, if I can cut down on any possible adjustment appointments right now, like I'm going to take this opportunity, especially with immediates, because I've done them where the patient comes back every day for little adjustments. So the nice thing with digital, it eliminates a lot of that. Because that's how it was with the traditional dent or traditional impressions. Um, which oddly enough, I just started another clinic and they don't have an idea yet. It's coming. And I've had to go back to the traditional way. And it's like, holy smokes, this is tedious. Like, no wonder nobody does this. So yeah, so just make sure there's space for the frenums. And then under extension. Oh yes. Okay, this is also with digital denture. So under extension, so when you place the denture and then you do those border molding movements at the posterior, so like right at the hemular notch, yeah, and like where the 7 and 8s are, that area oftentimes is difficult to capture with the scanner and also is an opportunity to improve retention with immediate dentures. So that area back there, I'll often border mold and then increase the height of the flange and then before doing my wash impression. But I find that with the scanning, one of the areas where the soft tissue capture is difficult is at the very posterior. Not impossible though. Just a little more challenging. And then I capture it with the reline. So especially for immediates, it's not that big of a deal. Patient gagging on the dentures. That is also something that's super common, especially with the digital. Something I've thought of doing that I haven't done is like marking the vibration line with a indelible stick. But what I end up doing at delivery, anyways, is just marking the vibration line, placing the denture, and then making sure the denture doesn't extend beyond that line, because that will be a source of gagging for the patient, as well as the thickness. So because they it needs to be a certain thickness for strength, but I'll often thin it out a little bit right at the posterior just to kind of help them out. And that makes a big difference too. So then you're not losing, because patients will ask me to make it look like a horseshoe. They'll ask me to reduce it more and more. And it's like, no, because then you're going to lose our retention. But I thin it out, not on the integular surface, but on the smooth polished surface and then polish it after. And that often makes a big difference and patients are really happy with that. So a couple of things for gagging. And like I said, that's more common with immediate dentures. As soon as you place it, the patient will possibly start gagging, and then you're like, okay, we need to evaluate this. So okay, yes, same thing. More common for me on the lower denture, again with immediates, is that the teeth will be set too far buccal. So if the teeth are set too far buccal, every time they bite in, they're like, it pops my denture out, it's moving. And that's because the force isn't going on the ridge, it's going in front of the ridge, it's unsupported. So then it'll pop that denture out. So again, when I'll take a wash impression, reline it. And to verify that, I just hold the denture up to the light and you can see where the ridge is, you can see where the teeth are set. So I do a wash impression, and again, you can see that, and then send it back to the lab and then ask for the teeth to be set over the ridge. And part of that is because of the guesswork that goes involved in making an immediate denture. And the other part is, of course, after the healing, like the bone's going to change, the gingiva is going to change. So it's almost impossible to predict where that's going to land. So just making sure when you do the reline appointment that you have the teeth set over the ridge for the lower denture. And then, yeah, strangeness. I had a patient yesterday say to me, I just can't stop sucking on my denture. Like, how do I do that? Like, what do I do with this? And I was like, I don't even know how to address this. So it's like patients will have these random questions about their dentures that it's like, there's nothing that can be done. So it's a mind over matter thing, is basically what I tell her. And every time I deliver a denture, a partial or a new denture, I just say, take it home, give it a spin, have some meals with it. You know where to find us if you have any issues. And again, that's after I've done the PIP paste and checked over everything. But at the end of the day, it's like a new pair of shoes. Patients just need to use it to get used to it and to see what's wrong, what's not working for them before you worry about trying to adjust it too much, because it does take some getting used to so much. And at first, they're going to notice how much saliva they have in their mouth, how they're drooling so much. They're going to talk about how food's getting caught everywhere, especially with partials. And it's like going back to setting patient expectations. I talk about all of this at the consult appointment and then again at delivery. So it's like all these strangeness, all that has been dealt with before. But yeah, is if you look and the denture is fitting fine and there's nothing that you can do, I just send them home and get them to get used to it, and then get them back and or let them call you and see what's up. Sore spots, PIP paste all day, every day. Only with immediate dentures within the first week while using indelible stick. Otherwise, PIP paste is my best friend, and I adjust everything that rubs off. So so yeah, if the patient has issues with cheek biting, so I've had this in the past before, and what it is there isn't sufficient horizontal overlap between the posterior teeth, so they're either cusp to cusp, or something very close. Basically, you need 2 millimeters of horizontal space from the buccal cusp of the uppers to the buccal cusp of the lowers, and that's just so you prevent cheek biting. So if you take a look at them right together, retract the cheeks, and if you don't see that, then again, have the teeth reset. I always take a wash impression, take a bite registration, and then send it back to have the teeth reset. Rare now with digital dentures, very rare, but I did experience it when I was doing traditional dentures. So that's something there to be aware of. So yeah, so if they've been wearing the denture, like they didn't gag when you delivered it, so you didn't think to look at that, but they come back and they have ulcerations on the soft palate, that's indication that the denture is too far extended, so too posterior. So again, use the indelible stick, mark the vibration line, and then just trim the denture up to that point, so that it's not beyond that. And then that will help with the sealing and get rid of those ulcerations. Oh, yeah, I kind of already talked about that. Posterior border thickness. So yeah, adjusting this polished side, not the intaglio surface of it. And then somebody had asked like last one, I believe, about S sounds and if they're not able to make their S sounds. So I put these two in there to help with that. So if the anterior teeth are too much vertical or too little horizontal overlap, they won't be able to make S or J sounds. So just recontouring the anterior teeth and then hollowing them out. I used to struggle with this, like doing dentures the traditional way where they'd set them in wax and then get them like a try-in appointment. But with the digital dentures and using the simplest system, and you're just recreating their denture, the teeth are staying in the same place. So I don't really have that issue anymore. So that's, but if you do have that issue, there's something to reference back to. So yeah, that is all that I have for today. It's a text or lab manual that we had in dental school. That's where I got all those information, but there's my email. So if you do struggle or come into other issues, feel free to email me. But otherwise, thank you so much. And that's all I had prepared. That's as many mistakes as I can talk about today.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bertsch. That was great and really gives us some guidelines of things to expect that might be an issue and how to correct those right away. I'm just wondering if there's any questions that might have come up during this session here today.
I can tell I need to go to the barber looking at that picture of me so clean shaven after. Not
You look
quite.
distinguished now.
Yeah, not quite the same.
All right. Well, perhaps while we're waiting to see if there are any questions, I can put up the. Oh, just get you to unshare your screen so I can then share mine to put up the QR codes. Perfect. All right. So I've got the first one up here. This is for your CE credits. I'll leave that up for a little while here and let everyone get that. The next one will be for our Orem events page where you can see what future webinars were coming up. Also from there, you can also see some of the previous webinars that have been on there. If you're new to the series, feel free to go back and check out some of our older webinars, some great information on there as well. And now the second one here. All right. Well, I don't see any questions popping up here today. So it means that you've done an excellent job explaining all of the issues that you have faced coming through.
I was hoping that we wouldn't have to belabor my mistakes.
All right. Well, if that is all we have for today, we'll call that a day. We have one more session left to go in this series, and I hope to see everyone back at that and enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.
Thanks, Daniel.